All right, welcome to the Explainer. I want you to imagine, just for a second, that we're prepping for a massive, high-stakes historical trial. And I'm about to drop a mountain of undeniable evidence right on your desk. We're looking at a single, seemingly random date on the calendar. But it's a date that quite literally holds the weight of the world.
If you just pick a date at random and ask, what actually happened on this day, most of the time you'll get maybe a historical battle, maybe a famous birth, or honestly, maybe absolutely nothing at all. But July 16th, well, as we're going to see, this one day gives you the birth of a global calendar, the launch of a moon mission, the literal dawn of the atomic age, the founding of a nation's capital, and a religious schism that permanently split Christianity right down the middle. That's not just a coincidence of historical trivia, right? That is a date that just keeps showing up at the absolute hinge points of history.
So let's get into it. Part 1, Faith, Empires, and Nations, spanning from the years 622 to 1861. I'm going to stack these epoch-defining events for you like exhibits in a trial, just to build this thesis. Take a look. In 1212, the Battle of Las Navas de Tolosa decisively turns the centuries-long Spanish Reconquista. Fast forward to 1790, the Residence Act is signed, establishing Washington, D.C. as the American capital. Jump to 1861, and on Abraham Lincoln's direct orders, Union troops begin their march into Virginia. That's the moment the American Civil War transformed from a political abstraction into a bloody reality. But to really grasp the sheer scale of July 16th, we actually have to look even further back. We're going back to the year 622. The Hijra of the Prophet Muhammad begins, his monumental migration from Mecca to Medina. Now, most days on the calendar are incredibly lucky to produce even one lasting human institution. But July 16th, it produced an entire system for measuring history itself. This single journey became the epic marker for the entire Islamic calendar. Think about that. Over 1 billion people today track time relative to this exact migration that kicked off on this very day. All right, let's fast forward a few centuries to 1054 and picture this incredibly visceral scene. It's a Saturday afternoon divine liturgy. 3 Roman legates stride right into the breathtaking Hagia Sophia in Constantinople. Acting entirely on their own authority, they walk right up to the front and they place a papal bull of excommunication directly on the altar. Just like that. With this single dramatic ceremonial gesture, they permanently split global religious geography. This was the formal start of the East-West Schism, the massive fracture between Western Christianity and Eastern Orthodoxy that, frankly, still defines the religious map of the world today. Moving right along to our next section, 20th century technological peaks. I need you to just process this mind-blowing realization for a second. The underlying architecture of the Cold War and the absolute crowning achievement of the space age, yeah, they share the exact same birthday. On July 16, 1945, the Manhattan Project detonated the very first nuclear weapon in human history at the Trinity Test Site in New Mexico. Then, exactly 24 years later, to the day, on July 16, 1969, Apollo 11 launched from Cape Kennedy, carrying humanity toward our very first crewed lunar landing. What's absolutely fascinating here is the sheer contrast in what these two moments represent for us as a species. On the one hand, you have this blinding flash in the New Mexico desert that births the atomic age and decades of tense nuclear deterrence. And on the exact same calendar date, a towering rocket launch in Florida that represents our absolute greatest exploratory triumph. It's the capacity for total self-destruction right alongside the capacity to leave our home planet, both completely realized on July 16th. Oh, and as a really chilling footnote to 1945, on that exact same day, the heavy cruiser USS Indianapolis left San Francisco carrying components for the atomic bomb that would eventually fall on Hiroshima. Now we need to shift gears for a moment. Section 3, a somber, darker chapter. 13,152. I want that number to sink in. That is the number of Jewish men, women, and children targeted and arrested in Paris by the government of Vichy France on July 16, 1942. These individuals were held at the Velodrome de Verre in Paris in absolutely horrific conditions before being deported to Auschwitz. Any honest, rigorous accounting of history requires us to hold the greatest triumphs of humanity and our darkest, most unimaginable atrocities in the exact same frame. July 16th is a day that fundamentally altered the world through brilliant innovation and discovery, yes, but it is also a day permanently scarred by the Veldiv Roundup. Okay, let's bring the pace back up for Section 4, Firsts, Births, and Quirks. We're going to rapid fire through this list because honestly, even the random trivia of July 16th contains celestial collisions, political tragedies, and massive cultural touchstones. Get this. In 1769, Father Junipero Serra founds California's first mission, basically the seat of San Diego. 1858, Barnadette Subiroos experiences her final apparition at Lourdes. Jump to 1935, and the world gets its very first parking meter in Oklahoma City. 1951, J.D. Salinger publishes his highly controversial masterpiece, The Catcher in the Rye. Oh, and in 1994, the comet Shoemaker-Levy 9 collides head-on with Jupiter in full view of astronomers worldwide. No big deal, right? And then in 1999, the tragic plane crash of John F. Kennedy Jr. off Martha's Vineyard closes out a massive chapter of an American political dynasty. And wow, we absolutely cannot forget 1950. Imagine the deafening silence of the massive Maracanã Stadium as Uruguay stunned the heavily favored host nation Brazil 2-1 to win the World Cup. It's dubbed the Maracanazo, and to this day, it stands as one of the single greatest upsets in the entire history of sports. It just adds so much incredible cultural flavor to this massive historical stack we're building. And the people's side of the ledger? It is just as jam-packed as the geopolitical side. Just look at the notable figures born on this day. We've got anti-lynching crusader I.W. Wells, polar explorer Roald Amundsen, Hollywood icons Barbara Stanwyck and Ginger Rogers, comedian Will Ferrell, and even Larry Sanger, the co-founder of Wikipedia, which, let's be honest, is quite literally the database making this explainer possible. And on the death side, Mary Todd Lincoln, First Lady during the very Civil War whose opening march occurred on this exact date, alongside Nobel physicist Julian Schwinger and Supreme Court Justice John Paul Stevens. Which brings us to Section 5, the final closing argument. All right, let's review the evidence one last time. One single date gives you the founding epic of Islam, the formal break between Eastern and Western Christianity, the turning point of the Spanish Reconquista, the birth of the American capital, and the opening march of the Civil War. It holds both the staggering triumph and the unimaginable horror of the 1940s with the Trinity test and the Veldheave Roundup. And of course, it marks the launch of the mission that finally put humans on the moon. So I'm going to leave you with this final, awe-inspiring question. Does any other day on the calendar stack civilizational turning points this densely, this consistently, across this many centuries? I submit to you that July 16th is the most eventful day in human history. Whether you buy the argument or not, you've now got the receipts. Thanks for joining this explainer, and keep questioning the history hiding in plain sight.